go to the NBA playoffs, which I spent my weekend covering, and let's start with this.
Number 5.
The Celtics are now the favorites, the betting favorites to win the NBA championship, and that, to me, is exclusively a function of Giannis's injury. If you told me right now Giannis is going to be fine, meaning this back injury is not going to continue to hamper him, it's not to me a function of whether he comes back or not, but is he capable of continuing to be the best player in the NBA, which when healthy I believe he is, then I still like Milwaukee better. The Celtics got a better draw here. It's just that simple. These teams are where they are because the Hawks beat Miami in Miami last week, but the Heat are the team you don't want to play. I'd much rather play Atlanta than Miami at this moment in time. So I think the Celtics have an easier draw. They will win that series in 5 at max, but I still would put the Bucks as my favorite unless you tell me Giannis is impaired by this injury.
So what percentage does Giannis have to be for you? Does it have
Close
to be
to 100.
Okay.
Close to 100. With Giannis as the best player on the floor, then I think the Bucks are the best team. If Giannis is not that, then they're not the best
I'm
team.
just a little skeptical, even with Giannis at 100%, with a player of that usage, like every possession practically. The Celtics just have more way to go. Tatum, Brown, and Derek White, they combined for 78 points in that game, in Game 1. They led by as many as 32.
I understand, but it's the matchup. They're playing an Atlanta team that is not... Look, the NBA, even the NFL has become a little like this now. When they added a 7th team to each conference, the play-in is a wonderful thing for the NBA. I love that we have it. I loved hosting it last week, and the play-in was a great idea, and it should continue. But largely, the play-in is a regular season enhancer. It is meant to enhance the regular season, and it has succeeded enormously in that. The flip side of it is you're going to wind up with some teams in the NBA playoff that just don't really belong there with everybody else. And that's what we're looking at here. Don't pay attention to what the Celtics swept Brooklyn last year in the first round. The Celtics are very good. The Bucks remain the best team if Giannis is healthy.
Number 4.
Number 4 on Greeny's takes here. Kawhi, I described him on TV this morning as being kind of like Halley's Comet because he comes around so infrequently that you forget he exists. And then he flashes through the sky, and your thought is, oh, yeah, I forgot. Kawhi's a top 3 player in the league. That is not an exaggeration. Kawhi at his best, peak Kawhi, is absolutely there with anyone you want. Giannis, Tatum, KD, Steph, LeBron, whoever else you want to put. Kawhi is that good. Let me give you some numbers from his 2019 title run, which, by the way, is the last time he played. No truth to the rumor that Kawhi Leonard has not set foot on a court since he won the championship in Toronto. But in the playoffs, dating back to that run, he averages 30 points, 9 rebounds, 4.5 assists. He has been a Finals MVP twice. He's one of 3 players all time to win Finals MVP for multiple franchises. LeBron and Kareem are the others. So I think we forget just how good he is because we see it so seldom.
Yeah, the defining postseason players of this generation are LeBron, KD, and Kawhi, who on 2 separate occasions, both in 2014 and in 2019, effectively extinguished 2 different three-peats. He was the reason the Heat didn't three-peat. He was the reason the Warriors didn't three-peat. If we get any approximation of that player, they have at minimum a 50-50 chance to beat the Suns. Obviously, what happens in Game 2 is going to be enormous, even without Paul George. If he's going to average 30 points and do it efficiently and check KD the way that he did, watch out for those guys.
He does it on both ends of the floor. That's your point. He won MVP of the Finals for D'ing up LeBron back in whatever year that was, 2014 or whatever. Yeah, 2014. So Kawhi makes it easy to forget because you just never see him. But he's a top 3 player in the league, and that's why they have a chance.
Number 3.
Number 3, the Lakers are going to sweep the jawless Grizzlies. And I say it that way because if the Grizzlies are not jawless, then it's not going to be a sweep. But I do not think that Ja Morant is going to be able to play the rest of the series. That hand is not okay, and it isn't going to be okay. Now, that's not to say that he won't give it a go. I think he'll play. I think he'll try. They'll tape it up. They'll do whatever. He was already playing with a brace on his hand. He already had a hand. That reckless disregard, that reckless abandon with which he plays is both his blessing and his curse. It makes him maybe the most entertaining player in the entire league to watch, but he got hurt the way you always knew he was going to get hurt. Flying through the air, just hurling himself into all of these bodies in the lane, and eventually something bad is going to happen. And in this case, it was his right hand being there to break his fall, and Anthony Davis landing on it, and his hand snapping backwards in a direction that it's not supposed to. I don't care what the x-rays say. There's no way in the world that guy is going to be himself again in the next week, and their season is going to be over.
You know what I hate? I hate the fact that in Game 1 of this series and in the Bucks Heat series, that the best player on the floor, or one of the best players on the floor, on a pretty much identical play, wound up hurting themselves and potentially badly. In Ja's case, it's the hand. In Giannis' case, it's the back. These guys are flying so high in the air. People are sliding beneath them and taking charges. That's a conversation that we do need to have.
Yeah, we will, and as we continue. I don't mean he won't play. He will give it a go. He's a tough kid. But that hand, there's no way. That's a shooting hand. I think he's done, and I think they're done. The rest of why are you making that face? Do you disagree?
I'd be surprised if it were a sweep. And the longer the series goes, the more that it benefits Memphis, obviously. But in part because of the way that the schedule shapes up. There's 2 games between 1 and 2, 2 days between 1 and 2, and 2 days between 2 and 3. Then they alternate every other through the end of a series. So if the Lakers are going to do it, I think it's going to have to be in 5 or fewer. The longer it goes, I'm going to favor the younger team.
Because they're older, you mean?
Yes, absolutely. That's not good. The longer every series goes and the deeper the Lakers get into the postseason,
No,
to
I
me,
get it, but
the
you know
more
who's not
volatile
old?
they
Austin
are.
Reeves is not old, and Rui Hachimura is not old.
We're not getting that game from him ever again, though. Who are we kidding?
I don't know. I mean, that's just the way we drew it up. Anyway, those are 5, 4, and 3, which brings us to this.
Number 2.
The Knicks won because they didn't trade all their depth. So for all of the hand-wringing that has existed about the Knicks not trading for Donovan Mitchell, and everyone talking at length about all the draft picks they weren't willing to part with, what is more meaningful were all the young pieces they didn't part with in a trade for Donovan Mitchell. Because those young pieces are the reason they beat Cleveland. The reason they won Game 1 is not because of the physicality of Julius Randle. It is, because they have a true star. I mean, the reality is if you wanted to have a conversation about it, would you just as soon have Jalen Brunson on your team as Donovan Mitchell? We could have that conversation. Now, it doesn't matter because it wasn't either or. They could have had both. But the next most important reason they won is because they're deeper. Now, they're a deeper team, and the reason they are deeper is that they did not do what they did in the case of Carmelo Anthony, which was trade everybody on their team who could dribble without the ball going out of bounds off their foot in order to get them. And they kept good players there. Now, would they be better with Donovan Mitchell? He'd be better. He'd be the best player on this team, but I'm not sure they aren't, as currently constituted, more dangerous than that team would have been. Now, they aren't a legitimate championship contender. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. They don't beat Milwaukee. They don't beat Philly. They don't beat Boston like this. But I do think that they have an excellent chance to win this series, and the reason is because they didn't trade away their depth.
Depth is so incredibly important. The playoffs are more a marathon than a sprint. And the Knicks have legitimately 9 good, value-positive players in their rotation. There are very few teams in the NBA that can say that right now. It's the depth that they didn't trade for Mitchell. They also preserved their picks. Cleveland gave up 5 first-round picks in that deal. So not only is it working out right now for the Knicks, but you have to feel fairly good about them being able to continue to build and potentially lure a third superstar.
Yeah, let me go back to that for 1 second. I'm going back to the box score really quickly from that game. How many Cavs, because the Knicks bench completely dominated them.
37-14.
Right, I know that, but the Cavs only really got contribution out of 3 guys off of their bench of any sort, and even that was one guy played 7 minutes. So you're looking at a team that, I mean, the Knicks are just so much deeper than them, and I think it does make a big difference.
A huge difference. So I'm pulling up the box score now. So in that game, the Cavs, it was Cedi Osman and it was Karis LeVert. They were the only guys that came off the bench and played more than 7 minutes. It's impossible to expect that much out of your starters the way that, and that's game 1. Imagine in Game 6 how gassed they're going to be.
Yeah. So the Knicks won because they didn't make that trade. Now, again, will it ultimately be their undoing? I suppose we'll find out. So those are my takes, 5, 4, 3, and 2.
Number 1.
And number 1 is death, taxes, and Draymond is going to kick somebody. That's pretty much one of those things in life you can count on. There's going to come a big moment, and Draymond is going to do something with his foot that's going to wind up costing his team. There was the legendary kicked him in the ding-ding, which became one of the great Mike and Mike bits of all time. And that was from the NBA Finals, and it will always be remembered because it changed the course of NBA history in so many different ways. If Draymond doesn't kick a guy in the ding-ding, they beat Cleveland that year easily in those NBA Finals. And the next thing you know, LeBron doesn't bring one to the land, and Kevin Durant doesn't go to Golden State, and all of those things happen. And so everyone, all we talked about forever was...
And then he kicked him in the ding-ding.
That was one of my favorite ever Mike and Mike bits. This one probably won't be remembered as much because it comes in the first round against Sacramento. But the reality is it could easily derail them from winning a championship. It could, and whenever this team gets knocked out of this year's postseason, we could be seeing the end of the dynasty. This could be it. This group has won 4 championships. They've been really good about as long as a collection of players generally tends to stay good. Very few teams have been as consistently good for as long as this group has. When healthy, those 3 guys have basically been around the finals every year for almost a decade. We could be seeing the end of it right now. If Giannis, if the expectation somehow becomes he is a shell of himself, well, then all bets are off. The other way, which is the Knicks have no chance of beating Milwaukee, I still think if they beat Cleveland, this is a sensational season because there has clearly been a big 3 in the East from the beginning. From whatever point in the season it is, Philly got hot. When did they get hot?
They've really been great over the last 4 months. Really.
4 months. So whenever they started out kind of...
Let's say Christmas. 500.
So call it Christmas. Since that time, it's been clear. There were 3 teams that had a legitimate chance in the East, and no one else did. And that includes Cleveland and the Knicks and... Well, I guess since the Nets broke themselves up. So to be next in line, I think is pretty good. If you look at the other teams in the East, you say, not only is this the next one in line, but they might be the most attractive one to players out there looking for their next stop. And the Knicks are a good team that have a lot of good players and seem to have a good spirit about them. I think the Knicks make themselves a fairly attractive destination for whoever it is that they're going to need to land to take the next step.
They definitely have done that for themselves, and they have all the future assets because they didn't trade for Donovan Mitchell. But I'll say this. 2 years ago, if I told you at this point in the playoffs that the Atlanta Hawks would reach the conference finals, you would have probably told me I was crazy, right? But they wound up upsetting Philly and doing it.
Right.
I'm not so sure the Knicks beating Milwaukee, especially if Giannis, or only if Giannis is hobbled, is all that much crazier. I mean, they have a top 5 offense. The reason that team had no chance 2 years ago was because they were built on their defense.
Right.
They have a top 5 offense, a 9-man rotation, a great coach, a big 2. I think they have enough ingredients to be live beyond round 1.
So you're telling me that you believe that with a healthy Giannis, the Knicks have a real chance against Milwaukee?
I would say
I don't.
Bucks in 6.
Okay, maybe. And again, either way, if they win this series, the season is a resounding success. If the Knicks had traded what they would have needed to trade for Donovan Mitchell, I don't think they would be ahead 1-0 in this series. Now, maybe they wouldn't be playing Cleveland because Donovan Mitchell wouldn't be on the Cavs, and thus the Cavs wouldn't be the team that'd be sitting there. But I'm old enough to remember the last time the Knicks went out and got themselves a player who was a legit superstar, still in or near his prime, and that was Carmelo Anthony. And what did they do? They panicked when it looked like they might not get him, and they gutted their team to get him. Gutted. They traded away every person on their team who could dribble the ball without it going off his foot out of bounds. They traded all those guys to Denver, and what happened? Denver got better, and the Knicks only got slightly better because there were only a tiny handful of players who you just put them on a team, and they're all of a sudden great. And Donovan Mitchell is not that. Carmelo was not that. Carmelo was very good, and he had really good days and some very good years with the Knicks, one in particular. but he's not a player that you just put him on the squad and then put anyone you want around him and we can beat you. He wasn't that kind of good, and neither is Donovan Mitchell. The Knicks won that game the other night and are going to win this series because of their depth, because they did not gut this roster to go out and get a player like Donovan Mitchell. Now, would I have traded all those picks for him? Maybe. Would I rather have him than not? Sure. But were you better off giving up everybody to get him? I don't think so. I think what the Knicks are showing and the NBA what we are seeing is this postseason is becoming more than ever just a war of attrition. Depth matters. And the Knicks won that game because they have so much of it.
Let me demonstrate that point for you. In that game, in game one of a 7-game series on the Cavs, Jared Allen, a starter, played 43 minutes. Darius Garland, 43 minutes. And Donovan Mitchell, 44 minutes. Again, in game one, Julius Randle led the Knicks in minutes, and he played 34. Their ability to hold off Cleveland at the end of that game was because their best players were fresh, because they got 93 minutes from their bench.
Yeah.
The Knicks have genuinely 9 value-positive players that they can use in a basketball game. Over the course of a 7-game series, that can be the reason you win a series that you would not otherwise.
Brunson also had foul trouble early. He only played 9. I'm doing this from memory, but we did halftime. I think he played 9 minutes in the first half, which means he was able to play pretty much the whole second half, and he played great. I mean, he was unbelievable in the second half. A whole other discussion to be had is if you had a choice between Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell, who would you take? And I think the answer is Donovan Mitchell. But the mere fact that you're asking the question shows just how good Brunson has been.
The differential between the two is much closer than the cost of obtaining one versus the other.
For sure.
There's no question about that.
I mean, thanks to the Mavericks and just the unimaginable, their unimaginable willingness, or at some point they kind of got stuck with their pants down, but they lost him for nothing. It cost the Knicks nothing but money to get him.
Like, sometimes the best way to see how good a player is just to look at the two circumstances before and after. Look at what happened to Dallas and look at what happened to the Knicks. Obviously, there are more factors or variables at play than just him, but that's a pretty good starting point. Not many.
No, that's the biggest variable.
Not many.
Without question.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.